Can good design shape a better world? At Monocle's Quality of Life conference in Barcelona this September, we'll be putting that question to the people who already are. Join leading designers, architects, and creative leaders as we explore how design intersects with culture, business, and everyday life. Plus, great food, excellent company, and plenty of Catalan charm. Find out more and book your seat at monocle.com/conference.
This is Monocle on Design, a show where we discuss everything from architecture and craft to furniture and graphic design. I'm Nick Manise. On today's program, we meet Lulu Harrison, a glassmaking specialist and winner of this year's Ralph Saltzman Prize. We also head to Lisbon to see a new collection at Made in Situ, plus a visit to Romania to meet the architect and designer Bogdan Ciocodeica. All that coming up on Monocle on Design. Hello and welcome to today's program. I'm joined in the studio by this show's producer, Maylee Evans. Maylee Evans, hi.
Hello, it's lovely to be on this side of the glass.
It's nice to have you over here. I mean, firstly, why?
Because I thought we have two stories in this show that kind of have a nice synergy between them. So I thought, why not bring that to the fore and make that a bit more clear?
And secondly, what is that synergy?
I think the theme is taking inspiration from the local and thinking very specifically about what is it about this region or this territory that makes it unique, and how can we harness the material found here to do something exciting.
And that's exactly what has happened at this year's Ralph Saltzman Prize, which has just been announced. It's an award which celebrates emerging designers. Nominees are selected according to certain criteria, including how their practices explore new directions for design, either through technical innovations or by presenting compelling design ideas, such as the hyperlocal. We've featured the prize before. Why did we want to return to it, Maylee?
I've interviewed the previous winners, including Matt Collins, Marco Campado. It's the material innovation that I think is really interesting, because the way that they approach their craft and are very quietly getting on with residencies and experiments is fantastic, and it's a brilliant opportunity to sort of peer behind the curtain and find out about some interesting things that might be hitting more commercial production and upscaling in the future. But at the moment, you've got this small-scale experimentation which needs to be happening, I think, in design. We need to be looking at new ways of working with materials, and the more ways we can figure out how to do that, the better.
And that's exactly what Lulu Harrison, who is the winner of this year's prize, has done. She's a geoalchemist, a glass artist and a designer. Now, typically glass is made of sand, soda ash and limestone, which are melted together at extremely high temperatures. But what I really liked about what Lulu does and why she's been recognised, and this comes to the fore in her project, which is called Thames Glass, she's looking at waste materials and how they can be used as ingredients in this process. So at the moment, this is small scale, but what we're starting to see and what we've seen through the evolution of our practice is there's the opportunity here for this to be adopted more broadly. So she started testing the idea of using these different materials when she was at Central St Martin's. She used river sands, wood ashes and waste mussel shells from Thames water to create just like these beautiful glassware pieces. And since graduation, her practice has now evolved to work alongside established brands and companies such as Arup. So I guess I wanted to find out a little bit more. So I met Lulu Harrison at the Design Museum, which is where her work is currently on show. And here she tells me a little bit more about her process and the evolution of her ideas.
I'd always been interested in doing something around water. I love swimming and it's a real passion of mine. When I did my degree, that was in Falmouth, so I was living in Cornwall, and I'd kind of built up a relationship with a lot of the local fishermen. They were kind of sending me out these like boxes of different scallop shells and oyster shells, and so I was grinding them and mixing it with binders, and it was kind of through a conversation with my tutor. He kind of told me about glass making and that actually sometimes shells were present within glass itself. So that began my kind of fascination to learn more about the history of glassmaking and the chemistry of glassmaking, and actually starting to do my own experimentations.
Tell us a little bit of that history that you dived into. What did you maybe uncover about glassmaking and perhaps its connections to place that you wouldn't have known otherwise?
I was really interested in how glass is made. I was basically interested in a soda lime glass recipe, which is one of kind of the most common types of glass you'll see. There were 3 components to that: the silica, the former body of the glass, and that's often kind of the sand source. And then you've got the alkali source, and that can help to bring down sort of the melting temperature of the glass, and it can be called a flux as well. And then you've got the limestone calcium source, and that can act as a stabilizer to help strengthen the glass. From a kind of environmental point of view, looking at the impact that was having and what the glass industry was kind of going through at the moment, I discovered a lot of these materials are actually having to be transported from halfway across the world. They're often very heavily mined. They have to be very high quality, kind of virgin, pure materials. So these are kind of a lot of the materials we're running out of. So my inspiration was to kind of think about how we could replace these with different kind of abundant waste materials, and particularly looking at how we could do it on more of a local level.
Tell us a little bit about how that started to work on a local level for you initially when you're at Central St Martin's.
Growing up by the river in Oxford, that was something I really was interested in doing, making a recipe, a glass composition that could be formed from different local and waste materials around the River Thames, because I spent a lot of time there. Again, looking at kind of replacing some of these more heavily mined kind of materials. For the kind of silica former, I was thinking about a local river sand. And then for the calcium source, thinking about, again, working with different shell sources. And then for the flux kind of alkali source, looking at working with different wood ashes and recycled glasses. So I'd literally be going around the river and kind of foraging and sourcing these materials myself and processing them, and speaking to different glass historians and scholars about how that might work. And processing the materials itself is like an art form, as well as taking them. You have to dry them out, clean them, grind them, sieve them. Yeah, they have to be like of a very good quality, basically, before they can go into a glass batch. So that was all kind of a big learning process.
You're also looking at things that are, I guess, waste or potentially damaging for the environment. One of the materials, quagga mussel shells, it's not just necessarily about replacing virgin things, but it's also looking for potential in materials.
Yeah, so the quagga mussels was a really interesting one because I was looking for a sort of a shell source around the river, having been part of different river organisations and speaking of a charity called Thames 21. I found out about the quagga mussel shell, which is a very highly invasive mussel, and they're currently getting trapped inside water pipes all across the country. And so I was contacting local water companies, got in contact with Thames Water and the head of the ecology there, and was just telling them about my idea and the project, and that, wondering if they had any source of these mussel shells. I went to go and visit one of their sites, and there were just these bags and bags and bags of mussel shells that were going to go into landfills. So I really wanted to see if I could incorporate that into the glass batch and actually make glass from this, what would be a waste material going into landfill.
What's curious about this for me so far is it feels like you're working at, I guess, a local scale. Is there a benefit to that, maybe rooting it in place or bringing some craft back to this discipline?
Having kind of done everything myself, that's why I could do it on a small scale, and also processing of the materials and foraging of these materials. Making wood ashes, burning wood, takes such a long time. So what I like about this kind of work is thinking about making these bespoke collections of glassware, which kind of, speak about place and provenance. And also there is kind of a limitation often to how much material is available. I'm
curious about the evolution of this, because I know there was also been explorations, I guess, on a more commercial scale. Yeah. How do you take it from using local waste, maybe at a smaller scale, to growing this and I guess increasing the reach of the work that you're doing? The biggest limitations was actually finding a glass studio that would be open to sort of experimentation and melting this batch that features different raw materials. And one of the first glass studios I worked with was the Glass Hub in Somerset, and they were really open to experimentation, and they had a furnace specifically for experimental glass batches and melting and playing with the material, and that was where I formed some of my first pieces. But then thinking about how it could upscale was always one of the biggest struggles, particularly trying to find studios and people to actually work with on this work. An amazing, very renowned glassblower called Elliot Walker got in touch with me and was really interested in the work that I was doing and wanted to collaborate. And they've got like a 90 kilogram capacity furnace. So it was an amazing opportunity to actually, having worked prior with a 7 kilogram capacity furnace, to then upscaling that to a 90 kilogram capacity furnace. It was just such a massive switch. And And that changed the nature of what you were making or how you were making it?
Definitely. I think it showed that like this could be done on a commercial level. And then, so we melted 90 kilograms of one of my latest batches. From that, we created a whole new glassware collection. There's been a huge amount of interest from different industries like drinkware companies, interior architects, because I just think it shows that there is opportunity to do this on scale. A lot of the time it can come down to things like funding or having projects coming in place, but now we've actually proved that this can be done. I
mean, I'm going to ask a very cheeky question.
Yes.
You know I'm here because I like the work that you're doing. Yeah. But why does this work matter? I mean, why should people care about this experimentation and this process that you've developed?
I'd say it's a very niche thing, but there's nothing really like it going on within the glassware world. And I think it's a really exciting opportunity to learn and explore about new materials, working with waste and incorporating that into glass making, especially thinking about, we want to be doing this on a more sustainable level and how we can do that. And that could even include kind of working with different communities, working with different industrial byproduct waste. I've had a lot of interest from glass blowers, from industry, from just all sorts of people that kind of want to learn and explore and be open to this new way of making glass, I suppose.
Is it about this kind of shift towards, maybe it's not the circular economy, but a design economy that's a little bit more, one, rooted in place, but two, having a lighter touch on the earth?
Yes, exactly. And really thinking about how we can make our own kind of glass recipes and be more self-sufficient and actually forage our own materials. And again, looking into the history of glass making and how it was done using 2 or 3 ingredients. So it's kind of taking a lot of inspiration from that, but bringing it to the 21st century and working with different waste sources that we've got now and incorporating that into new glass batches. And there's so much opportunity for it. It's just amazing. And I think it's just about how we can scale that up and kind of get people on board with it. And
then just, I guess, finally, I mean, we've talked a lot about UK materials, UK projects. Where next for you and for this initiative, project, idea, practice?
Future collaborations with different industries, even kind of taking it further afield and, working in different countries. I've been contacted from different places that are like, well, we want to make a glass from here, we want to make a glass from here, and we want to use local materials. And so it's about growing this knowledge and hopefully inspiring people to kind of learn more and understand more about glass making and the materials that can be used to make it.
That was Lulu Harrison there, and her work is on show at London's Design Museum until the 25th of August 2025.
So, Mei-Li, let's come back to this link between the two stories. We're going to Portugal now, but what's the connection between the Design Museum in London and the Made in Situ Gallery in Lisbon?
So whereas I suppose Lulu Harrison is working with waste materials very much 21st century, I thought it was an interesting juxtaposition to go to Made in Situ Gallery over in Lisbon, where we're going deep time. We're talking stones and thousands of years old. But again, Made in Situ is focused on highlighting the different regions of Portugal. It was started up by the French designer Noé Duchefort-Laurence, and it's all about sort of understanding Portugal and the specifics around craft. I think it's very easy to make grand statements about countries without really honing in on, okay, what is it about this particular region? What did this village do really well? How does this particular county work with cork, for example? And so this is just one of many projects that the gallery have been doing, focusing on a completely different material, working with different craftspeople and producing collections. I went last year and they had a collection called Corretos, which is all about folk traditions, taking the starting point of these carved wooden masks made for local festivities, the outcome being these wooden hand-carved stools, which were incredible, a little bit scary, I'll be honest, but they looked beautiful. But this time in a project launched as part of Lisbon Design Week earlier this year, we have a collection that takes its name from the Portuguese word xisto, meaning schist. And this is a type of metamorphic rock. It's very distinctively layered in appearance, and its layering or foliation, as you might call it, makes it easy to split into plates or slabs. So this collection, Xisto, is rooted in the geological landscape of the Foz Coa region. It's been a canvas for art for thousands of years. The Coa Valley Archaeological Park has the greatest collection of open-air rock art in the world. In fact, the engravings found in these areas was recognised by the government, who decided to preserve the site when it was under threat from a proposed project to build a dam. But also, the local Douro Valley vineyards are also planted in soil made up of schist. So again, it's a material that's been utilised in a myriad of ways in the area.
What I do like about this, I mean, and this is maybe strengthening that link with Lulu Harrison, is, while she's using maybe waste materials, it's still waste materials of a place in much the same way that this rock is of a place. Both of them are kind of making collectible design, maybe a little bit more exclusive, kind of one-offs. There's certainly potential for them both to be scale, but what I think people are drawn to with these sorts of collections, and what I even think they want to see at an industrial level, is something that feels special. And I think imbuing something with a sense of place can really help to give people that connection with an object that moves beyond functionality and has maybe a little bit more of a deeper meaning. Let's hear from Noe now.
What's interesting about exploration is that it brings you always to another environment. You never know exactly what you are going to find, and you don't really expect. You don't have any advanced thought about what will be your next project. And so when we are bumping in different situations where there can be radically different, one is much more related to the culture, the other one will be much more related to a technique or the material. The beauty of it is that every time we are discovering different people, different contexts, we try to immerse ourselves in different environments. It takes a lot of time to do it because we have to search not only for the material and the people. I think that's an open platform to many different ways of thinking, and that's why these projects can be radically different from one collection to another.
Maybe we talk about the outcome and what we've actually got here. So going from the geology, all of those stones, the ground, how has that informed the collection you've got on show here?
We've got on show three different environment of objects. One is a relation with estelos, which are these vertical sticks made of schist. I was really impressed by that. Because of the specificities of the Xisto, which is made of stratifications, there is a lot of density and pressure made with the time. And then the heat also, you arrive to a rock which is very strong on one direction and very fragile on the other direction, because you can break it with one simple tool. What I like about that is this kind of duality. We created some lights which are called esteos, which are these vertical lights. The smaller one is 60 centimeters, the higher one is 2 meters, made of 4 centimeters, the thickness of stone. So it's really pure, elegant, but also looks a bit fragile and very graphic. Also is a bookshelf, a table. The table is not there today because it broke 2 weeks ago, but we are reproducing it. It's okay, because we went to the limit of the material and showing how this material has so much strength. But I think we over-expected the strength of the material. But still, we are going to do a 5 meters table made of 6 centimeters slab. It's also a testimony of this human idea of always doing the bigger, the largest, the strongest. But it's true that I wanted to create my own big table. The last project is this engravement of stone we made with silex, which are actually technique we took from the Museum of Coa Valley. Now there is a museum because after the discovery of this engravement of the rocks in the river, they stopped the construction of the dam. They discovered these drawings, and it's the biggest site in the world of open air drawings. They created a museum, and then we worked with the museum to see how we could engrave and what kind of stone we could engrave, because all the stones can't be engraved in the same way. And we did these Paleolithic lights, which are actually very visual because they look like if they were presented like in a museum. You have the stick of LED, which is just lighting the surface of the stone, and the engravement of the stone made with silex. This engravement is referring to the typography drawing of the region, the Coa Valley and the Douro Valley. At the time of the Paleolithic, the people were drawing or engraving what they were looking at, like the animals around them. Here we are engraving something we can look at when we Google map the region, which is actually the vision from the top with the satellite.
You're talking about taking inspiration from the region. So in terms of the production of these pieces, were they made in that region? Were the artisans from that area? Tell me about that relationship with bringing this to life.
We did this collection because there were a possibility to create everything on site. We are producing the pieces in the quarry directly. So that's also a very interesting part of it, because the relation between the site where things are extracted, which are strongly and violently extracted, and the beauty of transformation, which comes to the very refined part, was also a kind of a dialogue which is very rich, and also bringing the project to another level.
Some of the people you've been speaking to from the region, have they seen the final outcomes or the work in progress, or what's the response been to what you've taken from being presented with all of this?
What is super interesting is that every time we are doing a project, at the beginning there are a lot of reticence. There is this kind of confusing moment where people don't know us. We are in a region where design doesn't exist. We are far away from the capital or from any big cities. So people are looking at us like, okay, let's try, let's see. And part of the project is really to speak and to interact with the people and try to understand them as they try to understand us. And as soon as there is a kind of trust, then we begin the project. As soon as they begin to do it and they see our involvement, they become totally part of it. And it's very interesting how they become very positive and dynamic in the process. So yes, we are doing this exhibition in Lisbon because it's the nearest big city, the main city of Portugal with Porto. I think it's a way to give back something to the territory where the project is made, and also to welcome the artisan or the people we are working with.
Noé Duchefort-Lawrence there, and the soundtrack you heard is by Nomad Elephant. My thanks to the Made in Situ team for letting us use that track, and to Maylee Evans, thank you very much for joining me.
Thank you very much for having me.
Finally, on today's program, we head to Romania, a country with a fast-evolving design scene and talent on the rise. Bogdan Ciocodeica is an architect and designer based in Bucharest, known for his refined approach to interior architecture and collectible design. An award-winning creative, his namesake studio is celebrating its 10th anniversary this year. And as the practice expands internationally, Bogdan is turning his attention inward, focusing on a new exhibition named Valuable. Monocle's Laura Kramer met him in the Romanian capital to discuss the country's creative momentum and his studio's next chapter. Bogdan began by telling Laura how his career has gradually zoomed in, moving from large-scale buildings to the finer details.
I studied architecture, so I did architecture for 10 years. After 10 years, I opened my own practice and started doing interior architecture. And I've been doing interior architecture for the past 10 years. So it's been 20 years since I started. Every time I feel like I made a step forward, it was more of I would say, a zoom in. So I went from big scale architecture to interior design, and now it's another zoom in going to furniture design. So it's like the need to further explore and focus on things more and more in detail, to discover their potential and the way they work together, the way they function together with my collaborator, Adela Maria Marius, which is an architect and a gallerist and a curator in collectible design. Together, we are planning the most extensive collectible design exhibition for this year. It's called Valuable. And we're trying to introduce to the Romanian public and to the Romanian collectors and architects the concept of collectible design, and to further show them how these special pieces can be used in interior design and how they function with different furniture pieces that are not necessarily from the same family. And also trying to keep up with the daily projects that we have at the moment, which are quite a few, I would say. We're doing a series of architecture projects, from retail to restaurants to private residences. But also I'm working on the design aspect of my job. So working on a new collection of design pieces.
And I guess too, along the way, you've been finding your own voice your own style? Do you think now you're at a point where somebody can look at one of your pieces and know it's your own? Do you even want that?
It's a very interesting question. The thing is that when it comes to interior design, I think the upside and the downside of things are that I don't have a specific style. So many architects have a very recognizable style. So you go for that architect for a certain type of interior. For me, it was never that way, because I feel every project is very, very different. It's very, very personal. It has its own story. It has its own final user. So they should be different. They have to be different. So then all my interior architecture projects are quite different in terms of aesthetics and approach and everything. So I think that's the plus, because we're bringing something to the table that it's more personal, it's more tailored to the needs of a certain client. The downside is that we don't have like a very recognizable style, which is fine. I'm fine with that. When it comes to design pieces, I think I have in mind a certain type of space where that piece could live, but I don't have a final client. I don't have a direct client. The client is not a real person that I've met and that I talked with and they gave me a brief. So then it's more abstract, the client, and then it's more me and less the client. And then you can recognize a certain style, a certain aesthetic, and a certain line when it comes to the design objects.
And what about retail? Are you in any shops? Are you hoping to do that down the line? Where are you at right now for other people?
When it comes to collectible design, at the moment I'm represented by a gallery in Paris, which is called Galerie Colcos. And also, starting this year, I'm the creative director of a new brand that is being launched later this year. It's called Numbered Edition. It's a return to slow design. So the whole philosophy behind the brand is that we need to stop consuming so much. We need to produce less, we need to produce better, and we need to produce things that last. That last in terms of physical durability, but also in terms of timeless design. So Numbered Edition is going to be a brand that is focusing on the gap between industrial design and collectible design, in the sense that the pieces are going to be produced in small workshops, are going to be produced under the supervision of the team, in close relationship with the manufacturers, which is the same way collectible design is produced. The difference is that we're not going to use very rare and very expensive materials. We're going to use very good quality materials. And also, the pieces are going to be numbered. It's going to be an open edition. It's not going to be a limited edition of like 4, 8, 12. This way, bridging the industrial design and the collectible design and having like more affordable price range for these pieces.
And what type of pieces will there be? Do you know the range yet?
Yes, it's going to be upholstered pieces, it's going to be sofas, it's going to be armchairs, it's going to be stone pieces, it's going to be lighting fixtures, all sorts of pieces, but very edited, very mindful in their role in a house and in the life of the people who would use them. So produce less and use more of them, more time. And even like 100 years ago, being able to leave them for the next generation.
And speaking of that, outside of Romania, you've mentioned Paris. You know, you were in Venice, but you were getting inspiration there. Can we find you in other places?
For the moment, it's Romania and France and Paris. And we're working right now on actually 3 projects internationally. So we're doing retail space in Ibiza, and we're doing a loft in Tribeca in New York, And also next year, we're going to start a project in Dubai. So we're working internationally and hoping to expand.
We spoke before we started about the design scene in Romania, how it's changing. Where are the opportunities that you see there, and how do you feel about what's happening in the space in Bucharest especially?
Romania in general, but especially Bucharest, is still a market that's growing and it's evolving. And I think it feels like a melting pot of things that are happening. And just because we don't have this structure that Western societies have, because we are, let's say, the democracy is more recent in Eastern Europe than in Western Europe, that allowed a different system to evolve. So it is not as much about structure and hierarchy as it is about value and what do you bring to the table. So it is easier, I feel, in a place like Bucharest to evolve and to develop way faster if you're good at what you're doing, if you're passionate about what you're doing, than maybe it is in a more established context where you need to go through certain stages and to do your training and to follow certain protocols, which here are not very well set in place. So if you are passionate about what you're doing and what you're offering, what you're putting out there is something of value and the people around you see it and appreciate it, then you can evolve faster and in more interesting and surprising ways that you would do in a more classical environment.
That was Bogdan Ciocodeica in conversation with Monocle's Laura Kramer. And that's all for today's show. For more design stories, listen to our 5-minute midweek bonus show, Monocle on Design Extra, which airs on Thursdays. And if you enjoy print, then do pick up a copy of Monocle magazine as well. It's on all good newsstands now. Today's episode was produced and edited by Maylee Evans. I'm Nick Manise. Thanks for listening.